Hello everyone, I am Wafa and I'll be taking the last session of the poem Fra Lippo Lippi from lines 376 to 392. Before we move on to my session, let's do a quick recap. So we know that Fra Lippo Lippi is a dramatic monologue written by Robert Browning. It has 392 lines written in blank verse following the iambic pentameter. It first appeared in the 1885 poetry collection Men and Women. The poem begins as the painter and monk Lippo Lippi, who is also the narrator of the poem, is caught by the guards for roaming the town's red light district drunk. As he begins the narrative, he is being physically assaulted by one of the guards. Lippi is only released when he says that he is a monk of Cosimo de' Medici. Lippo is still not satisfied and panics whether the guards will spread the fact he visits brothels, and so he first launches into the story of how he got there. Lippo said that he had been cooped up in his studio painting for 3 weeks, and when he heard the procession of musicians, he climbed out his window and joined them. He wanted a break from painting countless saints, and so he joined them and drank their wine and celebrated with them. Lippo conveniently left out the part where he almost entered a brothel. After this, he launches into his life story. When Lippo was young, he lost his parents and lived on scraps till a monastery took him in. There, the monks forced him to study Latin, which Lippo says was a waste of time. So when the monastery noticed his ability to paint, they decided that's what he should focus on instead. In the monastery, Lippo grows into an artistically gifted monk that at least has a stable roof over his head and food in his belly. The prior and other higher up monks didn't like his art though, because they thought it was too realistic. They thought it didn't give proper attention to what was really important, the soul and glorification of God. Needless to say, Lippo didn't agree with them. To show that he was a rebel with a cause, he sneaked out at night and parties, enjoying the company of women of ill repute. Lippo claims he is not an abnormal person, just an ordinary man who loves God. Then he continues speaking ill of the monks and how terrible it is to lead a monastic life. Then he starts feeling bad and nervous because he didn't want to get in trouble with the church. The last part of this dramatic monologue explains how Lippo has decided to get in the good graces of the church. So far, we know that he is going to paint a picture. This painting will include the God, Virgin Mary, Jesus, surrounded by a number of angels and a few saints and some illustrious biblical figures. And in the corner of the painting, he would paint himself. He realizes that he doesn't belong in such a religious painting, and before he could escape, he is caught up by his duties as a monk and then confronted by an angel. The angel explains to the other characters in the painting that Lippo was the one who created them, even though he is not like them. This is what lines up to 375 deliver. Now let's move on to my session. The last 17 lines of this poem goes like this. We came to Brother Lippo for all that. Iste perfecit opus. So, all smile. I shuffle sideways with my blushing face under the cover of 100 wings, thrown like a spread of curtains when you're gay, and play hot cockles, all the doors being shut till, wholly unexpected, in there pops the hot-headed husband. Thus I scuttle off to some safe bench, behind, not letting go. The palm of her hand, the little lily thing that spoke the good word for me in the nick, like the prior's niece, Saint Lucy, I would say. And so all saved for me, and for the church a pretty picture gained. Go 6 months hence, your hands, sir, and goodbye. No lights, the streets hushed, and I know my own way back. Don't fear me, there's the grey beginning, Zooks. These lines explain what Lippo imagines will happen inside the painting after the angel introduces him. The angel in the pictures will invite him because he created them, and then they will proclaim "Iste perfecit opus," which is a Latin phrase that means "this man created this." Then Lippo imagines himself being flung into the crown of angels and being covered by 100 wings, which will be spread around him like kirtles. Kirtles are loose gown worn by women. He also imagines that being in the midst of all these angels would be like playing hot chocolates. Hot chocolates is a game similar to blindfold, and with all the doors shut until the hot-headed husband comes. The hot-headed husband is a metaphor for the church and its moral restrictions on art. And when the hot-headed husbands come, Lippo goes to a safe bench and doesn't let go of the angel's hand that confronted and introduced him in the first place. He compares these hands to lilies and says that the angel was like the prior's niece, Saint Lucy. So Saint Lucy or Saint Lucia was the earliest Christian saint to gain popularity. She was the patron saint of the blind and the virgins. After this, he quickly jumps out of his narrative of how he imagined the events in the painting to the original story he was narrating when he was trying to prove his innocence to the policeman. He tells the guards after this painting is done, everything will be all right with the church. He believes that after the painting is done, he will fall into the good graces of the church, and he tells the guards to wait 6 months and they will see that miracle themselves. Then Lippo runs off after this narrative and tells the guard that he doesn't need any light and that he knows his way around. He says that he doesn't have to fear for him as the dawn is approaching. He ends his monologue with the word Zeus, which is repeated about 4 times throughout the poem, and it is nothing but a mild oath, which roughly translates to God's hook, referring to the nails that had Jesus onto his cross. So that's the end of the poem. Once again, the last part of the poem is basically Lippo informing his audience that he has a plan to re-enter the good graces of the church. He plans to create a large painting that includes God, Virgin Mary and Jesus. He will also include a self-portrait, and while he explains this painting, his guilt fades at this point, and he launches into an entertaining story about how the painted version of himself and how he plans to spend time with the angels. At the end of the story, he tells the guard that his reputation with the church will be restored in 6 months, and he flees into the night just as the sun rises. The line where grey beginning is mentioned, and this grey beginning depicts the dawn.